Welcome back to the Flying with the Flock podcast, the best place to get all of your Eagles and NFL related news. I'm your host, Matt, and welcome to, I believe, episode 11. I'm kind of forgetting because I've been on a little bit of a hiatus. I was dealing with some personal stuff, uh, so I do apologize for uh, the leave of absence without further notice. Hopefully, that does not happen again. And luckily, I was able to get back just in time for everything to start gearing up for the playoffs. We're starting to see how everything's going to shape up, especially in the playoff picture. So, without a further ado, let's get into this weekend's past game of Eagles Steelers. Your Philadelphia Eagles were able to defeat the Pittsburgh Steelers 27 to 13, beating Russell Wilson for the first time in Eagles history. So that's kind of nice. Before this, he was 6-0 against the Eagles, and I've remembered plenty of uh, defeats at the hand of Seahawks Russell Wilson. But besides that, looking at some of the stat sheets before we get into all the storylines leading into this game, Jalen Hurts was 25 of 32, 290 yards, and 2 touchdowns through the air. On the ground, he had 15 carries for 45 yards and a brotherly shove touchdown. For Saquon, he seemed to be a little bit banged up, and he's saying that he was a little bit injured before the game even started. Rumors were that during the game he got hit by Minka Fitzpatrick in the hip thigh area with Minka's helmet. So we'll keep you updated on that. There hasn't really been any news out of that part. Again, Jalen Hurts also dealing with an injury. Apparently, he broke what looked like his ring finger on his left hand. So luckily that didn't impact him throwing at all. But honestly, it was a big day for Kenneth Gainwell. For having to sit behind Saquon most of the year, he seems to be absorbing what Saquon's been doing and what Saquon's trying to teach him. So we're lucky to have, honestly, he's a good complementary back to Saquon. And he came in and not that he made a statement because he went 7 carries for 20 yards on the ground and 3 catches for 40 yards in the air, but he still played a vital part of this offense and just keeping on getting the first down. Looking at receiving, A.J. Brown had 8 receptions for 110 yards and 1 touchdown. Devontae Smith had 11 receptions for 109 yards and a touchdown. Obviously, Kenneth Gainwell, I told you his receiving stats, 3 for 40. And Grant Calcaterra, well, he only had 1 catch. He had 1 reception for 22 yards. I thought he had at least 3, but I guess that's about right. Uh, Another goose egg for Johnny Wilson and Jahan Dotson really not playing a major factor because they were trying to feed A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith a lot. Defense-wise, they were able to get to Russ twice. 1 sack from Nolan Smith Jr. and another sack from Josh Sweat, I believe. Yes, Sweaty J. So we weren't able to pick off Russ or turn the ball over at all. The fumble, quote unquote fumble, that really changed the game from Najee in the, I want to say, late third quarter when he fumbled on a pitch pass. Really wasn't a fumble. We didn't force that, but we were able to retain the ball. Nakobe Dean led the team in tackling, followed by Zach Bond, of course. So overall, it was a really solid day from all your playmakers on this Eagles offense. Looking at the Steelers, Russell Wilson went 14 for 22, 128 yards, and a touchdown. Uh, Najee was 6 carries for 14 yards. And receiving, they lacked George Pickens in this game, which really hurt their receiving game. But their top receiver was Calvin Austin, who had 5 receptions for 65 yards. Right behind him was Pat Fryermuth with 3 receptions for 22 yards and a touchdown. And right behind him was Mike Williams with 1 reception for 15 yards. The defense was able to get to Jalen 3 times, forcing a fumble from Jalen. And their special teams also played pretty well. They were able to force a fumble from Cooper DeJean as well. Overall, looking at how the Eagles came into this game, especially with a lot of controversy from A.J. Brown saying what part of the offense needs work, passing. Everybody knew that. But how he said it and then how the media spun it, the local Philly media ate it up. They always do this. The Philly media sucks, and that's where I like to pride myself in, is I'll give you the straight up truth on how everything is. The Philly media needs to I'm not making money, so I'll tell you the truth. But the Philly media need a story. And with the Sixers sucking, Flyers doing pretty good, and Philly's doing nothing in free agency, the only good team that they could try to pull something out of would be the Eagles. And of course, they would try to go back to the old McNabb and T.O. story of star wide receiver versus star quarterback. And in this terms, it doesn't really work. T.O. and McNabb were never really that great of friends, looking back at it. And A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts is literally the godfather to A.J. Brown's daughter. So I don't really see how they could try to tear this duo apart. I mean, one of the major reasons that A.J. Brown was so excited to come to the Eagles was Jalen Hurts. They've both played with each other since getting out of high school, and they wanted to play with each other in college, but it just never really worked out with A.J. Brown being at Ole Miss and Jalen being at both Alabama and Oklahoma. Overall, the local Philly media spun this story, and BG, being Brandon Graham, and now possibly not playing in the league anymore, we'll see about that, spun this story completely wildly. Brandon Graham added fuel to the fire, saying that they weren't really friends anymore, which he had no reason to speak on another man's relationship with another. He had no right, and realistically, BG was really in the wrong, and you could see him playing into the media a little bit, especially for I think he has his own show on 94.1. I believe it's called The Brandon Graham Show, I'm not sure. But he really spoke out of place there, and it seems like the Eagles were mature enough to handle it all in-house and use it to fuel the fire for the next game, which this is one of 2 big games that we have. We have this week this past weekend against the Steelers, which is big. They're a playoff team. They're supposedly one of the top 3 in the AFC, behind the Bills and Chiefs. And then we have the Commanders, who are also trying to stay in the playoffs. They're in the last seed, so we'll see how this all shakes out. I'll talk on that when we get closer to the Commanders. For the Steelers, it's really staying healthy. It's believed that George Pickens' hamstring sprain, or I believe it was a sprain, was level 2 or whatever. The second level above the least severe. So he could be out for a couple more weeks, apparently, according to Adam Schefter. He could be. Normally, it takes like 4 weeks for that injury to fully heal and for the player to get back on the field. So for the Steelers, you guys realistically just need to win this next game. It's against the Ravens, I believe. Yes, it is against the Ravens at Baltimore. So realistically, for the Steelers, it's staying healthy and winning this next game. If they can win, then they've won their division, which means that they have at least one home game in the playoffs. So it's just going to be, and for most teams, especially, we'll get into like teams like the the Lions. Uh, right now, especially for these perennial teams that are at the top, it's staying healthy through these next couple of weeks. All right. So, coming off of this Eagles Steelers game, we'll get into this past weekend's games and some of the controversies that happened within them. We are going to start off with Rams 49ers, one of the most forgettable games in the past probably decade, in my opinion. Rams ended up winning this 21, or not 21, ended up winning this 12-6. There were no touchdowns scored during this game, so all those points came off of field goals. Looking at some of the stats, looking at this Rams offense, Matt Stafford was pretty bad in the first half. He went like 4 of 20, or no, 4 of 12 passes, I believe, and like probably 20 yards. But he was able to find it in the second half. He did have a big bomb to Puka Nacua down the seam. He was able to split the two safeties. Uh, so let's go through this quick because there's nothing really of note during this game. Matt Stafford went 16 of 27, 160 yards. Kyren Williams, 29 carries for 108 yards. Puka was their top receiver and wasn't even close. 7 receptions for 97 yards. Cooper Kupp wasn't even targeted during this game. Their defense was able to get to Brock Purdy a couple of times and able to pick him off as well. Uh, Overall, nothing of note for player-wise on the Rams. Looking at the 49ers, they're really an insurrection. They have players quitting on them halfway through a game, and it's really not pretty over at the Bay Area. Brock Purdy went 14 of 31, 142 yards and an interception on the ground with their top 2 running backs being out. Well, actually, top 3, I actually believe. Isaac, oh boy, I'm gonna butcher this. Isaac Guerendo had 16 carries for 57 yards. George Kittle was their top receiver with 4 receptions for 61 yards. And then right behind him was Juwan Jennings at 2 receptions for 31 yards. Debo dropped multiple passes after tweeting that he needs to be throwing the ball more for them to win. And looking at it, probably don't throw any in his direction because he's not going to be able to catch that. Defense were not able to get home on the quarterback at all or turn him over. And overall, this is a really boring game. It does have implications for the playoffs because now with that win, the Rams are now in first in the NFC West with the Seahawks loss that we'll get into later. But overall, nothing of note really happened during this game, and it just shows that the 49ers are falling apart. And it's not that they're not well coached, it's that they're not holding it together over there, especially through all these losses. And injury has just overly plagued the team. Rams starting to heat up. I believe they've won like 6 or 7 straight now. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. We'll hopefully see a better game out of the Rams next week, especially being fighting for their playoff lives. Next up, we have Commanders Saints. Commanders are able to squeak by the Saints, 20-19. Jaden Daniels was 25 for 31, 226 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jaden Daniels also was their lead rusher with 11 carries for 66 yards. Obviously, Brian Robinson had 21 carries for 65 yards. Terry McLaurin had 7 receptions for 73 yards and 2 touchdowns. Right behind him was Alameda Zaccheaus with 3 receptions for 36 yards. And the next closest would be Dyami Brown with 3 receptions for 30 yards. This defense was able to pick off, I believe, Jake Haener was the starting quarterback for the Saints. I don't know. We'll touch on that in a sec. They were able to pick off the quarterback once and were able to get home It looks like 3 or 4 times. So this defense did play well. Offense looks like it struggled when it wasn't passing to Terry McLaurin or using Jaden Daniels' legs. Uh, yeah. So looking at this Saints offense, Jake Haener, I believe, started the game. I believe he left with an injury. He was 4 of 10 for 49 yards and an interception. After he left, Spencer Rattler came in, played pretty well, went 10 of 21, 135 yards and a touchdown. On the ground, their top rusher was Kendre Miller with 9 carries for 46 yards. And right behind him was Alvin Kamara with 5 carries with 12 yards. I'm surprised they didn't run it as much, especially with not, you know, starting caliber quarterbacks in at play. Their top receiver was Marquez Valdes-Scantling with 2 receptions for 64 yards. Alvin Kamara with 4 receptions for 58 yards. And Foster Moreau was right behind him with 4 receptions for 39 yards and a touchdown. This Saints defense was able to get home quite a few times on Jaden Daniels. It looks like he got sacked around 7 times. So that probably explains why this was such a close game. This Saints defense was able to hold them in. But ultimately, it probably shouldn't have even been as close because at the end there, a ref called for the game clock to stop when it still should be running because the Saints didn't have a timeout, nor did the player go out of bounds, or did he go into the end zone. So it gave the Saints enough time to run up and spike the ball, even though they probably shouldn't have had that much time. Spencer Rattler was able to throw for a touchdown, but he missed the 2-point conversion, ultimately ending the game for the Saints. Next up, we have Chiefs Browns. Another kind of boring game. Chiefs won 21-7. Patrick Mahomes went 19 of 38 for 159 yards and 2 touchdowns. Carson Wentz went 2 of 2 for 20 yards. Patrick Mahomes, we'll talk about this later, but he went down with an injury. So we'll see how long he'll be out. So Carson Wentz is currently your quarterback, Chiefs. As an Eagles fan and as experiencing things like the 2019 Eagles season and the 2020 Eagles season, good luck. Best of wishes. Rushing, their top rusher was still Kareem Hunt with 13 carries for 45 yards. Behind him was Isaiah Pacheco with 13 carries for 32 yards. Receiving, their top receiver was Xavier Worthy with 6 receptions for 46 yards. Behind him, DeAndre Hopkins with 5 receptions for 36 yards. And then Travis Kelce with 4 receptions for 27 yards. The 2 players to catch a touchdown was Juju. He had 1 reception for 7 yards and a touchdown. And the complimentary tight end to Travis Kelce, Noah Gray, with 2 receptions for 21 yards and a touchdown. Defense, they are able to pick off the Browns 4 times with 4 different players. Trent McDuffie got an interception. Nick Bolton got an interception. Brian Cook got an interception, and Jaden Hicks was able to get an interception. They're able to sack the quarterback, it looks like, 4 times. So, understandable. They're able to put enough pressure, and if you put enough pressure, I believe on Jameis was the one who started this game. If you put enough pressure on him, he will eventually start throwing enough picks. Looking at this Browns team, Jameis Winston went 16 of 25, 146 yards and 3 interceptions. Dorian Thompson-Robinson came in. He went 4 of 9 for 18 yards and another interception. So not all of them was Jameis Winston, but Dorian Thompson-Robinson also threw one. Jerome Ford was their top rusher with 7 carries for 84 yards and a touchdown. Nick Chubb had 9 carries for 41 yards. I believe he unfortunately went down with a season-ending ankle injury, so he really can't catch a break this season or last season. Receiving, Jerry Jeudy was their top receiver with 11 receptions for 108 yards. Uh, the next closest was Jordan Atkins with 3 receptions for 30 yards. Defensively, they were not able to sack the quarterback or intercept him, so overall, they weren't really able to put any pressure on this Chiefs offense that moved their, I want to say, their right guard to right tackle. So, yeah, that's going to be interesting. The Browns are in an interesting position being at 3-11. They have a chance to draft a quarterback for the future, but they said they're giving Deshaun a chance to battle for the starting quarterback. To me, now with the Browns announcing that Jameis Winston will be benched for Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Jameis Winston had his chance to be a starting quarterback in this league again, and he kind of blew it. I mean, it's a Jameis Winston show. You're going to expect a lot of picks, but he just didn't produce enough for this offense to win in a still close game. All right, with that matchup out of the way, we have Bengals Titans, another interesting game. Looking at this Bengals offense, Joe Burrow went 26 of 37, 271 yards, 3 touchdowns, two interceptions. On the ground, Chase Brown was their top rusher with 25 carries, 97 yards, and a touchdown. Jamar Chase was their top receiver, having 9 receptions for 94 yards. T. Higgins right behind him with 5 receptions for 88 yards. And Mike Gesicki being the next closest, being 3 receptions for 37 yards. Defense, they were able to turn they were able to turn Will Levis and the Titans offense over 4 times, and they were able to sack him once. So yeah, looking at this Titans offense, Mason Rudolph ultimately I believe came in after Will Levis went 8 of 21 or 8 of 12, 89 yards and 3 interceptions, whereas Mason Rudolph went 21 of 26, 209 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Tony Pollard was their top rusher with 17 carries, 45 yards, and a touchdown. Receiving, their top receiver, though, was their other running back, Tyjae Spears, with 6 receptions, 87 yards, and a touchdown. Behind him was Chisholm Okonkwo with 8 receptions, 59 yards. And finally, the next closest was Calvin Ridley with 3 receptions for 41 yards. Defensively, they were able to turn Joe Burrow over twice, and I believe Joe Burrow also had a fumble that they're not putting on here. But yeah, they're able to turn the Bengals offense over several times, and when Mason Rudolph was in, they were able to capitalize on it for the most part. But other than that, there's a lot of boring games this week, so I just got to get through it. Overall, Bengals keep their playoff hopes alive, though it is slim. There is still a possibility that the Bengals could squeak in at the 7th seed if everything falls right. I mean, they needed the Colts to lose one. The Colts lost this week. They needed the Dolphins to lose one. The Dolphins lost this week. Now they have to have the Broncos lose 2 of their last 3 games to try to sneak in. Speaking of the Dolphins, we are up with the Houston Texans beating the Dolphins 20-12. Looking at this Texans offense, C.J. Stroud, pretty good game. Went 18 of 26, 131 yards and 2 touchdowns. Their top rusher was, I don't even know who this is, Dare Ogunbowale. Had 1 carry for 35 yards. Joe Mixon, quite a quiet day for a pretty premier running back in this league right now. Only 12 carries for 23 yards. Though he had more yards through the air. He had 5 receptions for 33 yards in the air, being their top receiver. Tank Dell was the next closest at 2 receptions for 26 yards, and Nico Collins was 4 receptions for 17 yards and 2 touchdowns. This defense was able to turn Tua over 3 times. Derek Stingley having a 2 interception game. Also, the 1 interception came on the game-sealing play. So, yeah, this Texans team played pretty well, especially through the air. They were efficient. They didn't overdo it. But on the other hand, looking at this Dolphins team, Tua threw the ball 40 times. He was 29 of 40, so at least he hit the target most of the time. 29 of 40, 196 yards, a touchdown, and 3 interceptions. That's not a great stat line for Captain CTE. Devon Achane was their top rusher with 12 carries and 41 yards. And their top receiver was Malik Washington with 5 receptions for 52 yards. Jonnu Smith was right behind him with 9 receptions for 48 yards and a touchdown. And the next closest was Tyreek Hill with 2 receptions for 36 yards. Fun fact, all of Tua's 3 interceptions of this game all came on targets to Tyreek Hill. So I believe that defenses are starting to clue in that if you cover Tyreek enough, you're able to shut down this offense because they can't run the ball like they could last year. Defensively, they were able to get to the quarterback. It looks like 3 times, so that's fairly impressive. They were not able to turn this offense over though, with no fumble and no interception as well. The Dolphins' playoff hopes are in the balance right now. They need a few things to go right. I believe they need the Colts to lose, they need the Bengals to lose, and they need the Broncos to lose. So, similar scenario. These few teams in the AFC are in it, and they need each other to lose. But unfortunately, they could have wrote their own destiny for the most part, besides needing the Broncos to lose. But now with this loss, everything hangs in the balance for the team. Alright, so the next game we are going to be covering is Ravens-Giants. We'll go through this quick because this wasn't even competitive. Ravens beats the Giants 35-14. Lamar Jackson added to his MVP case, though I don't believe he'll win it. Lamar went 21 of 25, 290, and 5 passing touchdowns on the day. Derrick Henry, another quiet day. It was a quiet week for most of the premier or top running backs in the league. Derrick Henry had 14 carries for 27 yards. Lamar had 6 carries for 25 yards. Receiving, their top receiver was Rashad Bateman at 3 receptions for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns. Justice Hill was right behind him with 5 receptions for 61 yards and a touchdown. Mark Andrews, 2 receptions for 24 yards and a touchdown, and Zay Flowers with 6 receptions for 53 yards. This Ravens defense was able to get to the quarterback 3 times and turn the who was that quarterback? Well, it could have been Tim Boyle or Tommy DeVito over. But yeah, overall, a solid day for the Ravens, but don't get too far ahead of yourself. You still have to play the Steelers for the division. And even then, you gotta win out and hope the Steelers don't. Next up, we have the Giants, obviously. So, Tim Boyle. I'm not sure who was in before who, but I'm assuming Tommy DeVito was in before Tim Boyle. Tommy DeVito went 10 of 13, 68 yards. And Tim Boyle went 12 of 24, 123 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. On the ground, they couldn't get anything going with their top running back, Tyrone Tracy Jr., having 10 carries for 31 yards. And then Devin Singletary being right behind him with 8 carries for 25 yards and a touchdown. Receiving, obviously, their top receiver was Malik Neighbors, and it really wasn't that close. Malik had 10 receptions for 82 yards and a touchdown, and Wan'Dale Robinson had 4 receptions for 38 yards, being the next closest. This defense was able to sack the quarterback 3 times, but weren't able to turn the ball over at all. So, unfortunately, this beating this game came against a bad team for the Ravens, so I wouldn't. It just inflates numbers. If you really look at it, it's not that great, but whatever. We'll see what happens, especially when they play good teams. Giants continue to tank because you're in the race for the number 1 overall pick against the Raiders. Next up, we have Jets Jaguars, another more interesting kind of game. Jets were able to beat the Jaguars 32-25. So there you go. You got some scoregami there for you. Aaron Rodgers went 16 for 30, 289 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He was also their top rusher, which is a little bit of a problem. He had 6 carries for 45 yards. And behind him was Breece Hall with 9 carries for 30 yards and a touchdown. Through the air, Davante Adams was their top receiver, and it wasn't even close. It was 9 receptions for 198 yards and 2 touchdowns. Garrett Wilson was the next closest with 3 receptions for 56 yards and a touchdown. This defense was able to turn McCorkle Jones, or Mac Jones, over twice, and were able to get to the quarterback a couple times, but not overly that much. Looking at this Jaguars team, Mac Jones had to throw 46 times, so there's your problem. Mac Jones went 31 of 46, 294 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. That's going to happen if you force Mac Jones to pass the ball more than probably 35 times. Travis Etienne was their top rusher with 14 carries for 65 yards. Tank Bigsby was the next closest with 11 carries for 42 yards. Through the air, Brian Thomas Jr. was able to assert his dominance a little bit against this Jets secondary. He had 10 receptions for 105 yards and 2 touchdowns. The next closest was Brendan Strange with 11 receptions for 73 yards. This defense was not able to turn Aaron Rodgers over, they got 1 sack, so they're able to apply a little bit of pressure. But ultimately, the Aaron Rodgers was just able to outduel everybody. And to me, this is against a bad team. Let's be honest here, the Jaguars are not a good team. They haven't been all season. But it does raise the question, does Aaron Rodgers really come back for another season? And I don't really see a reason for him to. And I feel like it would be a thing where he would just come back for 1 more season and hopefully try to make the playoffs. But ultimately, I'm not sure if he comes back. I know he goes on the Pat McAfee show a lot, and he hasn't really revealed any of his plans for the future. So there is a strong possibility that he comes back for 1 more season with this Jets team, especially with a good head coach, especially with a good O-line and a good running game. He has the weapons that he wants. As long as he can take a little bit of pressure off of him and just allow him to throw maybe between 20 to 25 times a game and just be efficient and do some play action, this team might look better next season. But it all depends on whether Rodgers stays or goes. Next up, we have actually a pretty interesting game. It was pretty competitive in the first half. We have the Cowboys and Panthers. Cowboys beat the Panthers 30-14. Looking at this Cowboys offense, Cooper Rush went 18 of 29, 214 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Where the most damage, in my opinion, was on the ground, with Rico Dowell having 25 carries, 149 yards against a bad rushing defense. Receiving, CeeDee Lamb led the team, and it wasn't even close. He had 9 receptions for 116 yards and a touchdown. Brandon Cooks was the next closest with 3 receptions for 34 yards. This defense was able to turn Bryce Young over twice with 2 interceptions and was able to sack the quarterback, it looks like around 6 times. So they're able to apply pressure. I believe most of those defensive stats came in the second half because it was a fairly. I was watching the game and it was a fairly competitive game, especially in the beginning. Bryce Young, not his best day. They've been on a little bit of a streak where Bryce Young has looked good, the team has been more competitive, but this game just really wasn't theirs. Bryce Young went 19 of 28, 219 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Their top rusher was Chuba Hubbard with 10 carries for 32 yards. Bryce Young was able to get a touchdown on the ground, though, so there you go. Their top receiver was Jalen Coker with 4 receptions for 110 yards, 1 touchdown. Adam Thielen, still reliable, 5 receptions for 51 yards. And that's really about it. Another quiet day for Xavier Legette, 2 receptions for 7 yards. This defense was not able to stop the run or get to the quarterback or turn the quarterback over. So realistically, the Cowboys were able to maintain possession, just do long drives and eat up time. So this explosive Panthers offense couldn't be out there. So overall, good win by the Cowboys. They're able to improve in areas that they've been lacking at. And this is really not a great sign for the Panthers, but let's see if Bryce can bounce back from this. So the next game we will be covering is Buccaneers Chargers. Bucks beat the Chargers 40-17 in a kind of a surprising game. I mean, looking at this Bucks offense, Baker Mayfield was fairly efficient. He went 22 of 27, 288 yards, 4 touchdowns, but that interception problem is still there. He had 1 interception. On the ground, Bucky Irving led the way with 15 carries for 117 yards, and Rachaad White had a pretty good day as well, having 15 carries himself, but only having 64 yards. Receiving, Mike Evans was he's trying to keep that 1,000 streak, 1,000 yards per season going with 9 receptions for 159 yards and 2 touchdowns. The next closest receiver was Jalen McMillan with 5 receptions for 75 yards and a touchdown. This defense was able to turn Justin Herbert over once and was able to sack the quarterback 3 times, but nothing overly major in that department. Looking at this Chargers offense, Justin Herbert went 21 of 33, 195 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. On the ground, they really couldn't get anything going, with Gus Edwards having 8 carries for 23 yards. Receiving, Ladd McConkey led the way with 5 receptions for 58 yards and a touchdown. Behind him was Stone Smart with 5 receptions for 50 yards. And then Quentin Johnston with 5 receptions for 45 yards and a touchdown. Like I said earlier, this defense was able to turn Baker over. Baker's had a little bit of an interception problem this season, but I'm sure he could probably work it out. It's definitely lessened as the season's gone on, and especially with his top tier receiver back in the fold. They're able to get to the quarterback. It looks like once, but this solid defense was not able to apply pressure like they're normally able to. This game kind of has big implications for the playoffs. To me, at the very least, it shows that the Bucks are starting to heat up. And we've seen that over the past couple of games. They're going to be able to host a home playoff game. Chargers, it's a little bit concerning. They got out-muscled by another team, which has been their MO, is physicality. So we'll just have to wait and see how this team responds in their next game. Next up, we have the Colts Broncos, another game that was actually more tight than the score shows. Broncos beating the Colts 31-13. Looking at this Colts offense, Anthony Richardson went 17 of 38, 172 yards, and 2 interceptions. And on the air, he had 7 carries for 46 yards and a touchdown. Their top rusher, though, was Jonathan Taylor with 22 carries, 107 yards, and a fumble on the goal line. He dropped the ball before he crossed the goal line and allowing it to roll out the back of the end zone for a not a safety, for a touchback, which was not that great. Receiving, they really couldn't get anything overly going. I mean, their top receiver was Michael Pittman with 6 receptions for 58 yards. Kylan Grandson was next at 3 receptions for 47 yards, and then Josh Downs with 3 receptions for 32 yards. This defense was able to turn Bo Nix over 3 times, luckily enough, but they weren't really able to get too much pressure on the quarterback. Looking at this Broncos team, though, Bo Nix, kind of a mixed bag kind of day, not his best game. He went 20 for 33, 130 yards, 3 touchdowns, but also 3 interceptions. Though one of their major problems was they weren't able to get any of the rushing going. Bo Nix had 8 carries, was their top rusher. He had 8 carries for 23 yards. Their next closest was Jalen McLaughlin with 7 carries for 21 yards. Receiving, it looks like Bo Nix was able to spread the ball out a bit. Courtland Sutton was their top receiver at 3 receptions for 32 yards and a touchdown. Marvin Mims Jr. had 4 receptions for 20 yards. And then Adam Troutman was the next closest at 2 receptions for 20 yards and a touchdown. This defense was able to turn Anthony Richardson over twice, but we're also able. It was ruled a fumble, but that was more of an interception. It was on a trick play where Anthony Richardson threw it out to the flat, and then allowed for the line to set up in front of him and try to go for a deep pass. But where is this guy? Where is he? Nick I'm going to say this name wrong. Nick Biantonio was able to intercept the pass and run it in for, I like to say, a pick 6. That wasn't really a fumble. How they're ruling it as a fumble because it was a backwards pass. But hey, whatever floats your boat, NFL. But overall, a fairly solid game. When the Broncos need to win, they're winning games even though they're turning the ball over. As long as Bo Nix can get a good handle on the reins here of this offense, I believe there's a possibility that they could make a playoff push if everything goes right. Next up, we have Patriots-Cardinals. We'll keep this one quick because this was kind of a blowout, unlike the score shows. Cardinals beat the Patriots 30-17. Looking at this Patriots offense, Drake May went 19 of 23, 202 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. On the ground, Ramondre Stevenson was their top rusher with 13 carries for 69 yards. And through the air, Kendrick Bourne was their top receiver with 3 receptions for 44 yards. Austin Hooper was right behind him with 3 receptions for 38 yards. And then Antonio Gibson with 2 receptions for 31 yards. Looking at this defense, they were not able to put any pressure on Kyler whatsoever, and were not able to turn him over as well. This Cardinals offense, though, looking at Kyler Murray, he went 23 of 30, 224 yards, no touchdowns, but also no interceptions on the day. On the ground, James Conner had a pretty good game, 16 carries for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. And through the air, the top receiver was Trey McBride with 9 receptions for 87 yards. Greg Dortch was right behind him with 3 receptions for 60 yards. And then Marvin Harrison Jr. with 2 receptions for 32 yards. As I said earlier, this defense was able to turn Drake May over once. and we're able to apply a little bit of pressure and make them antsy in the pocket. So, yeah, a fairly efficient day for the Cardinals. Staying in the playoff hunt is fairly important for them right now. They have to keep up with the Rams and Seahawks for their division, and they have to hope that if they can't get their own division, then they have to pray that teams like the Commanders lose a couple games here through this last stretch of the season in order to sneak their way into the playoffs. Next up, we have a really big game. This is Bills-Lions. This game I really wanted to watch, but it was on at the same time as Eagles-Steelers. Bills were able to beat the Lions 48-42. Both teams kind of gave up on defense in this one, which is kind of funny to me at the end of the day. Overall, this was a fairly exciting game. Looking at the stats here, Josh Allen continues his MVP campaign, going 23 for 34, 362 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. James Cook had a fairly efficient day with 14 carries, 105 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Josh Allen also had 11 carries for 68 yards and 2 touchdowns. Through the air, their top receiver was Ty Johnson. I don't even know who that is. Ty Johnson had 5 receptions for 114 yards. Keon Coleman had 1 reception for 64 yards. And Dalton Kincaid had 4 receptions for 53 yards. Other than that, there wasn't really anybody major besides Khalil Shakir had 6 receptions for 39 yards and a touchdown. This defense was able to sack Jared Goff, it looks like 3 or 4 times, but were not able to turn the Lions over through the air. Rather, they were able to get the stop on 3rd down and get off the field and limit the amount of points that the Lions were able to put up early in the game. Looking at this Lions team, Jared Goff nearly threw the ball 60 times. He went 38 for 59, 494 yards, and 5 touchdowns. I'm surprised he didn't throw any interceptions during this game, especially throwing the ball 60 times. Jahmyr Gibbs was their top rusher with 8 carries for 31 yards and a touchdown. This really shows that you can beat it's hard, but if you can stop the Lions' run game and their explosive plays, you can beat the Lions. But you got to gear towards that and give up the passing game. But you have to be able to put up points of your own. Receiving, Amon-Ra St. Brown was their top receiver with 14 receptions, 193 yards, and a touchdown. Sam Laporta was right behind him with 7 receptions for 111 yards. Jahmyr Gibbs, 5 receptions for 83 yards and a touchdown. And Jameson Williams with 3 receptions for 37 yards and a touchdown. This defense was unable to stop Josh Allen whatsoever. There was a shovel pass. It was almost like a basketball chest pass for a touchdown that if the refs didn't call it back, would have been one of the probably funnier plays of the year. But Josh Allen was doing anything and everything that he wanted to this team. Ultimately, during looking at some of these stats, both teams were even in total yards. The Lions had the slight edge in passing yards, but the Bills ran away with rushing yards. It just looked like the Bills were more efficient, and overall, some plays like the onside kick with 10 minutes left in the 4th quarter, and Matt Collins running it down nearly for a touchdown really hurt the Lions. And now, and we'll get into some of the injuries that they have, but now coming into this time in the season, everything's getting tighter now. I mean, the Eagles are up there, the Vikings are right on their tail as well. The Lions have to start playing safe. Although aggressive is their style, and I won't fight that, I do understand that. They are a premier team here. If they start to lose it a bit, anything's going to be for the taking. The road was to go through Detroit to get to the Super Bowl, but I'm not so sure about that now. And we're going to see how that plays out, especially against some important games that they have coming up, some divisional games that they have coming up. Looking at Sunday Night Football, yeah, the Packers basically blow out the Seahawks 30-13. Looking at this Packers offense, Jordan Love had a pretty efficient day. He went 20 of 27, 229 yards and 2 touchdowns. Josh Jacobs had a pretty good day as well, being one of the only premier running backs in the league to have a pretty good day. He had 26 carries for 94 yards and a touchdown. Through the air, their top receiver was Christian Watson with 3 receptions for 56 yards. Behind him, Josh Jacobs with 4 receptions for 42 yards. My apologies. And Romeo Doubs with coming off of an injury, I believe, with 3 receptions for 40 yards and 2 touchdowns. This defense was able to turn Geno Smith and Sam Howell over twice and were able to sack the quarterback a few times, also knocking Geno Smith out for the rest of the game. Speaking on Geno Smith, when he was in the game, he went 15 of 19, 149 yards and an interception. Sam Howell didn't do too much better. Honestly, he did a lot worse with 5. He went 5 for 14, 24 yards and an interception. On the ground, Zach Charbonnet had 8 carries for 54 yards and a touchdown. And through the air, Jackson Smith-Njigba had 10 receptions for 83 yards. DK Metcalf was the next closest receiver with 3 receptions for 28 yards. This defense was not able to stop this Packers passing attack at all, and Jordan Love was just running back. It reminded me a little bit of Rodgers and Favre, where he's just running around a little bit and then slinging it deep to the open receiver over top of the safety. Overall, this is a good win for the Packers, who are trying to make a push to get into the playoffs and stay in the playoff picture. The Seahawks, this loss, I believe, knocked them out of the playoff picture right now. They have to keep up with the surging Rams, and hopefully, if they can't win their division, hopefully they got to pray that a couple of these wildcard teams lose a few and they win out to jump up into the playoffs. All right, let's get through this Monday night doubleheader pretty quick because nobody really watched these games. Bears-Vikings. Vikings beat the Bears 30-12. Looking at this Vikings offense, Sam Darnold was fairly efficient. He went 24 of 40, 231 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. On the ground, Aaron Jones had 18 carries for 86 yards and a touchdown. Justin Jefferson had 7 carries for 73 yards and a touchdown. Jordan Addison had 7 receptions for 63 yards, and T.J. Hockenson was right behind him with 5 receptions for 52 yards. This defense was able to sack and make Caleb Williams uncomfortable. It looks several times. They weren't able to turn him over, though. But looking at this Bears offense, Caleb Williams went 18 for 31, 191 yards, a touchdown. Through the air. On the ground, their top rusher was DeAndre Swift, of course, with 19 carries for 79 yards. Through the air, Keenan Allen had 6 receptions for 82 yards and a touchdown. DJ Moore was the next closest with 8 receptions for 46 yards, and Rome Odunze with 2 receptions for 39 yards. This defense was able to turn Sam Darnold over twice and made him force a lot of incomplete passes. But overall, they just really couldn't get the job done and slow down this slow down this Vikings offense entirely. Now, our final game of the week, probably the worst one. Falcons beat the Raiders 15-19. Let's get through this quick. Kirk Cousins went 11 of 17, 212 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Bijan was really their offense. He had 22 carries for 125 yards. Drake London was their top receiver with 3 receptions for 53 yards and a touchdown. And Kyle Pitts was the next closest with 4 receptions for 28 yards. This defense was able to turn Desmond Ridder over once and applied a bit of pressure to the quarterback as well. Looking at this Raiders team, Desmond Ridder went 23 of 39, 208 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Desmond Ridder was also their top rusher with 5 carries for 28 yards. Receiving, their top receiver was Jakobi Meyers with 5 receptions for 59 yards. Next closest was Amir Abdullah with 7 receptions for 58 yards. Brock Bowers had a quiet day. He had 3 receptions for 35 yards. This defense was able to turn Kirk over twice and sack the quarterback quite a few times, making Kirk second-guess a lot of his throws. But the Falcons were able to sneak out of this with a win and hopefully try to keep their playoff hopes alive. Alright, so now being done with that, some quick notes from around the league. The Eagles, especially after this past win, are looking to gear up for a deep playoff push. We'll see how everything shakes out seeding-wise, but they should at least be top 2 by the end of the season. And if they win out and the Vikings lose 1 and the Lions lose 1, then they might be able to sneak that first-round bye away from the Lions. Right now, the Lions continue to get decimated with injuries, with them suffering at least 4, 3 to their defense. 1 was a broken jaw, another was an Achilles tear, and another was probably like an ACL, MCL injury. I know David Montgomery, though, is now out for the rest of the season with a PCL tear as well. Hopefully they're able to keep filling up holes on this offense with them constantly popping up and creating problems for this team. We'll see if they'll be able to hold it together, especially in these last coming weeks here. And a side note, Aiden Hutchinson did say that if the Lions were able to make the Super Bowl, he would be ready in time to come back and play in said Super Bowl. So we'll see how everything shakes out. Lamar did have an amazing day. I do want to say that. But we got to remember, it's against the Giants, guys, all right? It's not a good team by any sense of the word here. So the media has to stop blowing this out of proportion. He had a good day. Threw for 5 touchdowns. But at the end of the day, it's against a bad team. I'm not even proud when the Eagles beat the Giants anymore. But you know it's going to happen. The Bucks find their way again, and and Baker's starting to get his mojo back. So we'll see how these next few weeks play out, but they could definitely win out and win their division as well. Mahomes is out indefinitely with an ankle injury. He's week to week, so we'll see. We'll see if Carson Wentz is able to hold down the fort. I'm not sure if Mahomes will be back in time for their Saturday game against the Texans. So we might see a Carson Wentz start for the first time since like 2020, maybe 2021. 2021, yeah, because he played for the Colts then. But we'll see. We'll see how everything plays out. As I've mentioned, the race for the 1 seed narrows down to the Lions, Eagles, Vikings are the most likely to get the 1 seed at this point. Eagles need the Lions and Vikings to lose. Vikings just need to beat the Lions and have them lose 1. And the Lions just need to win out to hopefully get these 2 teams off their back. And as of this morning, it was being reported that Michael Penix will get the start down at Atlanta, meaning that this is probably the end of Big Kirko's time down in Atlanta. We'll see whether he's traded, if he retires. It's kind of up in the air at this moment, but we'll ultimately see how he's able to respond to this benching, whether he comes back and plays another season for a different team after being traded, or whatever the means of playing football is. Alright, so let's go through this quick. I'll pick this weekend's games. This past weekend I went 15-1, and overall, since the last time I saw you guys, I was like 100, and I want to say like 58. Since then, I'm 158 to 66 in my picks. So believe in me. Trust me. Alright? Next up, so for Thursday Night Football, we have Broncos Chargers. I'm going to probably pick the Chargers. Broncos have struggled against good teams, and I believe that this will probably be a bounce back game for Herbert and Hardball. Next up, we have Texans Chiefs. Uh, I'm not sure if Mahomes is leaning to play towards this game, so that really decides it for me. If Carson Wentz plays, I give it to the Texans, but because I believe that the Chiefs have some form of black magic, I'll have to give it to the Chiefs. Somehow, they'll probably find a way to win in the waning seconds of the game. Next up, we have Ravens Steelers. Give me the Steelers. Ravens historically, especially under Lamar, have struggled against the Steelers, and I could just see the Steelers pulling one out to win the division here, weirdly enough. Next up, you have Bengals Browns. Give me Bengals. This isn't really a question. Bengals need to win out and hope that Broncos lose one more to get that last playoff seed. Giants Falcons, although the Falcons are starting a rookie quarterback for the first time this season, still give me the Falcons, especially over this Giants team, and we'll see the start of the legend that is Michael Penix Jr. Next up, you have Lions Bears. Give me Lions, although the Bears may try to make it a little bit more competitive, especially with all the injuries the Lions have been taking. Give me the Lions. I just trust the coaching more, and especially I just believe in the team just that tiny bit more to get the win when it matters. You have Colts Titans. Give me Colts. Although the Colts may try to find a way to lose, they're the better team right now. They're the better coached team, in my opinion. So I believe the Colts walk away from this matchup with a win. Next up, we have Rams Jets, and although I could see the Jets doing something weird and just having like two big games back to back, give me the Rams. They've been on a hot streak, and they're finding ways to win against teams, even if it's ugly, which I can respect that. So give me the Rams, especially being on a scorching hot win streak. Next up, we have Eagles Commanders. Give me Eagles, although we're going into their house. I still believe in my team just that little bit more than this Commanders team that struggled against the Saints this past week. And if we can just key in on stopping the run and trying to contain Jaden Daniels and force him to pass into this secondary, I feel fairly confident that we'll get away with the win here. Next up, we have Cardinals-Panthers. Give me the Cardinals. Cardinals need to continue to win to try to stay in this playoff race, and I'm just not sure if the Panthers have any more of this energy or magic left or the swagger to try to win anymore. Next up, we have Vikings-Seahawks. Seahawks need to win this to stay in, but I'm not sure whether Geno Smith will be ready for the game, so give me Vikings winning pretty handily, and they need to continue to win out to try to get this number one seed. We have Bills-Patriots. Give me the Bills by a lot. I believe the Bills will come away from a division victory. They've been on a hot streak as well, especially against good teams, so I expect them to beat the Patriots pretty handily here at the end here. Next up, we have Jags-Raiders, and although the money line is even, still give me the Jags. They put up a pretty competitive game against the Jets, and the Raiders are pretty much tanking for the number one overall pick. So overall, give me the Jags. I trust them just a little bit more than I trust the Raiders right now. Right now we have 49ers Dolphins. Give me the Dolphins. I trust the Dolphins just a little bit more, especially if they can get this passing attack going to beat a banged-up 49ers team coming off of a pretty bad loss as well. Next up, we have Bucks Cowboys. Give me the Bucks. Probably, I'm not expecting another blowout like this past week, but I do expect them to deal with the Cowboys in a pretty handily manner, I guess you could say. But I feel like they'll deal with their business pretty well. And finally, we have Saints-Packers. Packers need to continue to win to try to just keep their spot in the division and playoff picture. So give me the Packers coming away with a pretty solid win against a pretty bad Saints team. Finally, to round us out, looking at some of the standings, the Bills are 11-3 atop the AFC East, and they're probably going to win that division. Chiefs have already, well, no, they've already clinched their division. So Bills, Chiefs, and Texans have all clinched their division, and all have clinched a playoff berth as well, I believe. Steelers have clinched a playoff berth, but with a win they can clinch their division. Same with the Ravens as well. Looking at this, at the NFC, Eagles with a win this weekend against the Commanders can clinch their division. Rams, the NFC West is up. It's up for grabs. Cardinals could still have a chance. Seahawks could still have a chance depending on what's happening to Geno Smith. And Rams are in the lead, quote unquote, right now because they have the better, I believe, interdivisional record right now. Lions and Vikings. This NFC North is still up for grabs. Lions are in the lead right now at 12-2, though the Vikings are at 12-2 right now. The Lions have the better interdivisional record, putting them atop the NFC North. And looking at this NFC South, technically it's up for grabs between the Bucks and the Falcons. I just can't really see the Falcons really rebounding for the rest of the season. So I believe that this division is for the Buccaneers to lose right now. Alright, so that's this week's episode. I want to thank you guys for waiting for me to get back and hopefully this doesn't happen again. I've been doing pretty good on picks while I've been away. Past couple of weekends, there was one weekend in the past month where I was able to go undefeated in my picks. So we'll see. Hopefully I'm able to continue this. I want to get back to the weekly schedule that I had. We were going pretty strong there, especially coming to an important time in the season. I hope to be back on a regular basis. But with all that being said, I hope you all have a good one, and I'll catch you on the next one. See ya.